We're here with Senator Andrea Stewart-Cousins, who is the minority leader of the Democratic State Senate. Thank you for joining us at the Capitol and having us here.
Nice to be here.
We've been doing this story on the IDC, the Independent Democratic Conference, which of course is a group of Democrats elected in Democratic districts who are now
Partners
with the Republicans.
Yes.
You have been in the Senate. You've seen this group form in its initial stages to what it is today. When they decided to form, a few years ago, in 2011?
It was 2010, actually.
2010. What was the reasoning for them?
At that time, there was some concern voiced by the leader of the IDC that he was unhappy with the leadership. I think they were concerned, they said, about corruption, dysfunction. There was just overall concern. So they wanted to just have their own little group that would, quote unquote, get things done. And here we are 7 years later. And with all that has transpired over the 7 years, certainly the Democrats and our conference has proven to be a serious conference. We're not, obviously corrupt. We are taken seriously. We have legislative agenda that is a progressive one. The leadership certainly has changed. I was elected at the end of 2012, and we've been able, in all respects, to present, I think, what Democrats expect us to present, but what we don't have now is a functioning Democratic majority, which obviously we could have. So I said, over the years, the reasons as we have become stronger as individual legislators and as a conference, the reasons change. 2010 was a very difficult year electorally for everyone. And the Democrats, were hoping, obviously, to have a solid majority. And when we came out of that 2010 cycle, we had, lost our majority. And at that point, everybody was just trying to figure out how to move forward. And that, again, is when they split off. So I think at this point with Trump now, and the agenda that's coming down from Washington, and people being so aware of how government impacts them. And I think that's all part of it. For a long time, you'd run into people who would say, oh, well, it doesn't matter to me. Government doesn't matter to me. What do I care? And now people understand in very, very deep and profound ways why government matters. And not only national government, but people have turned their attention to state and local government. And to be in New York, which is a progressive state, a blue state, and find that on the state level, we are fractured needlessly, I think is of great concern, not only to we who are experiencing every day, but for people outside who are looking in, trying to figure out, what's the problem and why is it a problem?
What would your majority be if the IDC did not exist?
Well, this year, there were 32 Democrats elected to the Senate in a 63-member, chamber. So the reality is we would be a majority. In 2012, we were a majority, and it was 2012 was the first time that the IDC, despite the Democrats, and this was, again, before I was leader, but despite the fact that we had a solid majority in 2012, it was then that the IDC decided to take their membership and make a formal agreement with the Republicans to give them the majority. So, it only takes 32, and I guess we have a special election coming. We will have 32 registered Democrats in the chamber again, and it's just, getting everyone to work together. It is extremely, extremely important that we find a way forward to do this because there is so much at stake in New York. And what I also remind people is that on the state level, Republicans control 33 legislatures. Around the country, Republicans control 33 state legislatures, and Democrats only control 5. Why? Because Republicans have clearly looked at the state legislature for so many reasons. One, it's the pipeline to the federal government. Two, it's the place where things like redistricting happen, where even in this environment where they keep saying, oh, throw these things back down to the state, let's do this for the state, let's block grant things, all these things that are terrifying to so many people, it matters who's in state government. It matters who controls state government. So the Republicans clearly understood that. So here in New York, where we should be a majority, the Republicans here have obviously understood it and have found a way to entice some Democrats to enter into a formal agreement with them in order to keep them in power.
What have the Republicans done to entice these Democrats to leave their conference? They're elected as Democrats. They're
Right.
on the Democratic Party line. So, the voters assume that they have Democrats representing
Right.
their interests
Right.
when they go to the Senate. What do they get out of it?
Well, you get a lot of things when you're in the majority. You get an opportunity to have a bigger office. You have, instead of ranking positions, you become the chair. And if you're the chair of some committee, whatever it is, you're able to at least, on its face, create some policies as it relates to that issue area. There are more resources that come with being in the majority, more resources for a person's district. There are more resources for the individual senator. So, it's obviously, clearly, more interesting to be in the majority. And so, that's what they get out of it. And meanwhile, though, what people don't get out of it is, again, the sense that the people that they're representing are going up there with their issues and their objectives in mind. People don't vote for you here, no matter what your party is, and expect you to go up there and enter into a formal agreement to actually leave the members of your party behind and the millions of people that they represent in order for you to partner with the opposite party. And frankly, that's what's happened. So there's an opportunity to, again, we always talk about building the trust among voters. We talk about voter disenfranchisement. We talk about all these things. And on many levels, we could do this better. We can, A, make sure people are much more aware of what's happening in the various government levels. B, make sure that our base votes and that they don't wake up every 4 years and then get excited because something did or didn't happen. And to really make sure that when you send someone there with your franchise, with your petition for them to do the right thing, that they're actually there doing it. And I think it's a legitimate expectation that when you run as a certain thing, that you should be caucusing with those people who have that. And I always look at Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders said he was an independent, So, he ran as an independent. He was elected as an independent. And when he went, he obviously caucused more with the Democrats. But he didn't say, I'm this, and then do something else. So again, if you want to be independent, then be honest. Just go independent. There's an app for that.
Some of these members have just joined. They've increased their size in the past few months since the election. Have you spoken with any about coming back? What would it take? Are they expressing what it would take to come back to the Democratic side?
A lot of them express that they want to come back. Like I said, they want to, but at this point, they have a chairmanship here and they're got a perk there.
But they could as Democrats if they were in the majority.
Yes, they could.
The public is becoming more aware of this. There have been protests happening, especially in the past few weeks. Almost every single day, there's a protest, sometimes two,
yes,
of different members. Is there any acknowledgement of the heat that they're feeling from the public?
Well, I hear from the public. I don't necessarily hear from them, but I certainly hear from the public because, I've never seen this much energy around politics and government. And, people just they're so frustrated and they're so frightened and they're highly energized and they just don't know what to do. So I think so much of this organic behavior that's going on is really creating a level of involvement that, yes, they obviously must feel because, we're all feeling it. We're all feeling it. But, I'm hoping, again, that this isn't episodic, that this isn't just, here we are in March and then, summer comes and everybody just goes back to their, little enclaves. And I think people, hopefully, after this last experience in November, will continue to be engaged. Because once the ordinary people, grassroots people, get engaged and understand the impacts, what could happen, what isn't happening, how they can sort of motivate people to do the right thing. Once they get engaged and keep doing that, I believe that everybody, when they come up here, no matter what party you're in, will have a tendency to do the right thing. And that's all. Public service it should be a calling. For me, it's a privilege. And yeah, I want to get things done too, but I don't want to, get things done at the expense of the people. And, I'm not saying that we can't work across the aisle because, I've worked across the aisle during my whole government life. But you don't have to sign a deal to only work across the aisle. I said, if that were the case, why isn't, Senator Schumer and Senator Gillibrand, inking that deal right now and working with Mitch McConnell? Why? Because they understand the importance of standing for something, of even if your team isn't the winning team at that moment, you stay there, you strengthen your team, you get clear on what could make this team, the winning team, and you work at it together. You just don't abandon the team and say, oh, I can get a better deal with the winning team. And, no matter what, always, because you're there, continue to side with that particular team. I think we have an opportunity to regroup, to look at how important it is for us during these very, very frightening times to really come together and be the team that people sent us here to be.
Would you be willing, as a Democratic leader, to primary some of these people who've left your team? Well,
you know what? We have not even begun to talk about, at least I haven't begun to talk about what's going to happen, because we are, we're in March, and we are, we've got a long road before we're in these 2018 elections. I mean, of course, my ideal world is that we have some special elections. You don't know what's going to happen, and my ideal world is what I said. We come back, we do the right things for the people and for each other, and move forward. So today, I'm talking about today and where we are.
Where we are right now is in the middle of budget negotiations, and the budget's due in a couple of days. With that being said, there are several pieces of legislation that the IDC has said they're just as progressive as the Democrats, if not more progressive. It's hard when, even as a journalist, to look and see the differences between the forms of legislation and see how their legislation is more progressive. How much of what they've been campaigning on is going to make it into that budget?
Well, apparently not much. I mean, the reality is that when we put forward we tried to put forward our resolution, the beginning of the whole budget season begins with, obviously, the governor giving his ideal of what should be in the budget, and then each of the houses the majorities in the houses create their ideal, and that's the place from which everyone starts to negotiate. For the first time, the so-called coalition, which is the IDC and the Republicans, decided that they couldn't even agree on what the ideals coming from this House would be. So the IDC presented their ideals, which were 85% the Republican version, but a few of the, more progressive things. And the Republicans presented theirs. And of course, neither of them allowed us to present ours, which was extremely different.
So right now, as Governor Cuomo is sitting in the room, the famous 3 men in the room is now 4 men in the room.
Right.
How many Democrats are in that room?
There are 3 Democrats. Well, there's the governor and the speaker and
Speaker of the Assembly.
The speaker of the Assembly, Jeff.
And the IDC.
Yeah, and so there's 3.
Interesting.
Yeah, and there's Senator Flanagan, but again, because the Republicans are the majority in that coalition, again, the framework from which they're really beginning is the Republican framework. And it's just like, Senator Flanagan, who's the leader, stood up and said, well, we agree with them like 85%, but there are a few things that are different. So they're not even in what the majority position is in terms of negotiating. So clearly, they're trying to define themselves as being different, but the reality is that it's very much, they're never going to dismiss out of hand what the Republicans are saying, because they're partners.
What could get passed if the Democrats were in the majority?
I think we could do so much more. I mean, we could do so much more in terms of ethics reforms. We could do so much better. I mean, even these victories that we had with the minimum wage, for example, I mean, that was a multi-step process. And the first time they were just happy to say, oh, we raised the minimum wage, and the fact that somebody was going to get to $9 an hour by 2015 didn't seem to bother anybody. And so we kept kind of pushing and pushing, so finally, this was revisited, but still not with indexing. And so, the indexing would allow for these things to happen automatically, because we have to understand that this is a debate that we shouldn't continue to have. As the cost of living goes up, things change. And yet we couldn't do it with the indexing. The SAFE Act, which was passed, it was, could not have happened without the Democrats, who were, all of the majority of my members, frankly, because with the numbers of people who were willing to say, we have to handle guns responsibly, and we need to know who's out there with, assault rifles and so on and so on. The number of people in the Republican Party, just didn't exist. So this had to happen this way. I mean, when you talk about health care, I mean, my conference said, during this time we were so concerned, obviously, with the threat that was going to happen with health care. And the fact that we would, lose health care for millions of people and lose billions of dollars. My conference was saying, we need to be looking seriously at single payer and standing up and saying, what is New York? Because we don't know what they're going to do. And, there are certain things. You need health, you need housing, you need an education. I mean, the kinds of initiatives that we are taking with education and making sure that the funding is there, and that no matter what zip code you're in, that we are funding this in ways that really produce the results that we need. And we need to be speaking in a unified voice with that. And that's the problem. When you're not speaking in a unified voice, you're already starting, 10 steps behind where you should have been starting. If you're speaking with a unified voice and you're saying, look, these are the parameters from which we are going to work, because this is the objective, not, okay, we're all the way back here because we're partnered with somebody who's, even 50 feet farther back than you are. So we're automatically having to start from a place. It's almost like building a wall that you didn't have to build, and then climbing halfway up and saying, well, we got halfway up the wall. Well, yeah, but why is the wall there? It didn't have to be there. So, that's kind of the things we're up against. We're always worried about women's reproductive health here in New York, and they'll say, well, not everybody's pro-choice. It's true, not every Democrat might be pro-choice because Democrats have always had a big tent. The vast majority are, and I always go back to 1970. New York's laws as it relates to abortion predated Roe v. Wade, because Roe v. Wade happened in 1973. And there were 12 Republicans in the chamber, in a Republican-led chamber, that joined with the majority of Democrats to make sure that women had a right to make choices about her own body. Now, apparently, there's not one Republican who would vote to codify the existing law, the existing 1973 law in 2017. And we'll never know if there is one, because with this arrangement, we'll never get a chance to ask the question.
Meaning the bills will never be
The
put
bills will
forward
never be presented.
because the chairmanships are not controlled by
Right,
the majority.
right,
elected majority.
and because the agreement that they've made is that anything that the other one doesn't like will never see the light of day. So, it makes certain things even non-starters. When you talk about election reform, well, we've got, I've got a bill, early voting bill. We've got, same-day registration. I mean, we're trying to enfranchise people. We understand that if you have a right to vote, we need to make it easy for you to do this. This never happens on the Republican side. The Republicans are never going to allow an early voting bill on. And so even though the IDC could say, oh, well, we would want that, because again, the formal arrangement is that if one wants something, the other one, it doesn't show up. So there are so many things that will never ever get to the table where people can say, oh, well, I care about those things. But the prevention of it coming to the table will never let that manifest, and you could go DREAM Act. I mean, you could just over and over and over again. These things will never have to be taken up because of the arrangement that's here. So it's certainly a unique situation, but I think one that New York is not benefiting from because again, there's people here who have expectations, not only of their elected people, but of the government. And there's an expectation that we come there to do. And like I said, we're not going to win every battle, but you definitely, have a better chance when everybody's fighting on the same team, everybody's fighting together.
Final question, because I know you're very busy.
Thank you.
We're approaching 2020. And the Republicans, if they control the Senate, as they do right now, redistricting is going to be up to them for the most part. If you can't win back, if you can't get these seats back, or these IDC members are not replaced, what do Democrats face in the next decade if they don't have any sort of say in redistricting?
I mean, continuing gerrymandering. I am, an example of a person who has a gerrymandered district. I share 3 cities with another senator because the Republicans wanted, in the retirement of a Democratic senator, the Republicans wanted that seat back and gerrymandered the district in such a way that, they believed they could get that particular seat, which they didn't. Senator Latimer sits in that seat, but we're sharing 3 cities. I mean, makes no sense. There is, and like I said, the district that, if you look at, my district is 35, and it is literally the profile of a smiling old man with a scraggly beard. I'm telling you. It is amazing.
At least you can find it on the map.
I mean, you can find him, and I call him Yaskar White Rock Green because those are all of my districts. But and everybody sees it. It's not a Rorschach. It's not like, oh, what do you think? No, you see Yaskar. And I mean, that's ridiculous. Again, people in these positions shouldn't be allowed to pick their voters. And by all means, I think if we leave with nothing else, we want voters to be allowed to pick their people, and not only when they pick their people, rest assured that their people are going up there to do what they sent them to do.
Senator, thank you very much.
You're very
I really
welcome.
appreciate it.
Thank you.